welcome Babu DasGupta.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning to all. I'm delighted to be here, and a special thanks to Anne. I'm the only one who calls her Anne, and I hope so, and for inviting me. So again, I'm delighted to be here. Now, I'm going to pace around, because if I stand still and talk, I'm going to just fall asleep and fall down, because I'm suffering from terrible jet lag. So please, raise your hand if you can't see the slide very well. So the title of the presentation is called Discovery to Innovation, Lessons Learned based on my 35+ years of academic, industrial, and government service. And I enjoyed every sector. Before I begin, though, here is the outline. Essentially, I'm going to focus on what the federal government does, what kind of support it provides in terms of basic research, innovation type work, and then I'm going to share with you some of the success stories that have evolved from basic as well as innovation programs. Share with you from my perspective some of the lessons learned over this long period of time. And the latter part of my presentation is going to focus on the lean startup methodology. Now, how many of you, can I see a show of hands in the audience as to how many of you are familiar with that concept, the lean startup movement? Okay, so I'm going to spend a lot of time on that, and please pay attention to that, and I would expect a lot of questions on it. It's all about teaching entrepreneurship. And as faculty members, when I was a faculty member, I was always interested in empowering students because they are willing to take risk. So the lean startup methodology is not just popular in the United States, but it's also gaining a lot of attention globally. So I'm going to start with a very basic definition of, fundamental research or discovery or basic research. And as you can see, it's all about acquiring knowledge. A funding agency or sponsoring agency gives you money, you hide in a room, you recruit a student, you do a lot of work in the lab, and then you gather some knowledge, and then you disseminate that knowledge through publications. That's basically what basic research is all about. Innovation, on the other hand, has to do with simply saying, oh, I have a brilliant idea. That's no good. That idea has to be new, and it has to be implemented in some form. And by the way, it has to create value for the customers. That's what innovation is, okay? Now, this, if you look at the sources, the author, Greg Sartle, very recently wrote a paper. It's a very interesting article. He talks about the 4 types of innovation, the basic research, breakthrough innovation. A good example of breakthrough innovation is the iPhone, okay? He talks about sustaining innovation, that occurs in the existing market. How many of you drive Toyota Prius or BMW i8? Existing market, incremental innovation. Those are good examples of sustaining innovation. The disruptive innovation. How many of you have Netflix at home? That's a darn good example, a dramatic innovation. When Netflix was introduced, people, they were not sure. They thought it was unnecessary. They thought it was just a fad. But guess what? And now people are saying, oh, gosh, we can't live without Netflix. At my house, we can't live without Netflix. So it really is a dramatic innovation. So he talks, he takes these 4 types of innovation, and he introduces the term innovation matrix. And basically, the innovation matrix is really helpful in identifying the right strategy to solve a problem. But before you solve the problem, you need to ask 2 questions. 1, is the problem well defined? And the second question is the domain of capabilities needed to solve the problem, is that domain also well defined? Okay, so that's what the innovation matrix is all about. And very briefly, in sustaining innovation, both are very well defined, the problem as well as the domain of capabilities. So here are the sources of funding for discovery and innovation. But you know what? When you look at this, this one is absolutely not complete because we can add more features to that. For example, you have the angel investors, and in every country, we have fools, friends, and family supporting people, in terms of research and innovation. And then, of course, we have the federal government, the local government, or the state government, and that's what I'm going to focus on. Now, before I dive deep into my presentation, one of the things that, when Anne invited me, she wanted me to talk a little bit about how do the federal agencies work. And by the way, one of the things I should mention at the very onset, that there are many agencies, right? You have the DOD, you have the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense, the National Institute of Health, the National Science Foundation. So rather than talking about how every agency works, now you will find a lot of slides. I added an appendix so you can have, you have additional slides that you can refer to later on when the slides are posted. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'm just going to very briefly talk about the National Science Foundation, how it works. It's very unique. When you compare the NSF with other agencies, it's the only agency that's totally independent. It reports to the National Science Board that is comprised of members, about 20 or 24, that are appointed, they're appointed by the President of the United States, okay? The National Science Board has a lot of responsibilities. It acts as an advisor to the President and to the Congress, and it also provides a lot of guidance and recommendations to the National Science Foundation. And the people who make up this board are essentially from the leadership roles, very high positions at universities. Maybe there are a few exceptions in where they come from, large corporations. And the National Science Board is responsible for approving large amounts of funds. It gives testimony to the Congress and so on and so forth. The money that NSF provides to the grantees, okay, based on the proposals getting funded, it's totally equity-free money. It's not a contract. There are no such things as deliverables. So, even if your research turns out to be totally messy, totally disgusting, you don't have to worry about returning the money. It's equity-free. But the proposals go through a very, very competitive process based on NSB-approved merit review criteria. Now, the other thing is, people often ask, well, who writes up the request for proposals, or what in America we call solicitations? Well, the program directors who run the various programs, they're responsible for crafting the solicitation based on input, not just from the management, but also from the community. They talk to the professors, they talk to a variety of people, and they say, hey, you know what, we see an urgent need for blah, blah, blah. And then based on that, if it is worthwhile, they might craft a solicitation. Oftentimes, the input might come from the White House. So for example, when you look at the slide, you will see the National Robotics Initiative, NRI, the BRAIN Initiative. They came directly from the White House. And this is where NSF then immediately works with other agencies to create a solicitation that is common to all. Okay? So that's typically how NSF works. And again, in the appendix, I talk about some of the other agencies. Speaking of sources of funding, if you follow the legend, it's very simple. The very top curve shows the trend in the federal support over a period of time. The second from the top is the corporate funding. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this slide for too long, but I just want to identify some key takeaways from this slide, and especially when you take a look at what happened in 2015. When I was preparing the slides, I really sincerely tried very hard to get a more updated chart, covering at least 2016, but I couldn't. I tried to pull my hair, but then I found out that I have no hair, so I didn't have to suffer too much. But if you look at the key takeaways, the thing that I want to point out right here in 2015, federal agencies provided less than half of the US basic funding research in 2015. Folks, that is a significant decline in federal support for basic research in comparison to other years. So of all the total amount that everyone pitched in for basic research, federal support was less than 50%. And then if you look at the corporate funding, the increase is due to, as you can see, the pharmaceutical sector putting in money for basic research. The next slide shows the obligations from the various agencies. Now, naturally, some select agencies are shown here. They don't show, a lot of the other ones like the environmental, the EPA and other agencies. But the key agencies are identified. And the thing that I want to show you is, as you can see, in comparison to other years, there's an increase in funding in 2009, 2010. The reason for that is those are the 2 years when President Obama did the stimulus package, because the economy was really bad at that time. So he introduced the stimulus package to sort of stimulate the economy. And that's one of the reasons, he called it the American Recovery Act. And that's one of the reasons you see that bump in the funding level, okay? So the Congress in the United States is after every agency, not just NSF, but after every agency. They're saying, look, and for the right reason, that we are giving you the taxpayers' money, okay? Show us the return on investment. Now, I thought, I was very selective in choosing some of the examples, and I thought I'm going to share something that you're already familiar with. So if you look at the slide, the top 5, most of you, or perhaps all of you in this room, are familiar with. Google, the barcode scanners, the magnetic resonance, the GPS, Siri. Anne just mentioned Siri when she was talking, had that question. Now, the last one you may not be necessarily familiar with, the Gleevec cancer drug from NIH. Okay, and these are just a few of the success stories. What is sad is when I worked for the National Science Foundation, it's like, I don't know how many of you have heard of the expression called, afraid of your own shadow. People don't publicize. They do all these, they get these success stories, and they're put on shelves collecting dust. So naturally, the taxpayers think, oh my gosh, all this money is being wasted. Nothing is being done. But it's not true. Tremendous amount of work is being done. And those stories need to come out so people appreciate how the taxpayers' money is being used. Okay? Now, one of the things I want to mention here, the 100% credit does not belong to all the sponsoring agencies. Innovation doesn't work in vacuum. And the funding agency doesn't really, absolutely provides the seed investment, but it takes a lot more than that, and that's the term partnership. So there are many partners, with this industry or others who work with the grantee to make all these things happen. So what did I learn based on my 35+ years of experience? And I wanted to keep this very simple. Even to this day, from my perspective, basic research is not very well understood. When you talk to someone, invariably they will say, I don't know, what is the reward? How long is it going to take you to finish it? What are you going to do with the results? Okay, so it's still very misunderstood. And especially in this political environment, what I'm afraid of, and the community, the professors, they think that it's really politically vulnerable these days. But even with the decline, we should still appreciate, regardless of what country you are, that if there's federal support for research and innovation, we need to appreciate that, because the seed investment can do a lot. And the third one is also interesting, realizing the fact that the support from federal agencies is kind of in a decline now. The states are giving money, and the states are promoting collaboration amongst universities and others for research. So essentially, they're sparking research and innovation by working together. Universities, it could be medical schools and industry to make things happen. Okay, enough of basic research. Next comes innovation. Now, when you look at this slide, it's really confusing, right? I love this slide. I don't know how many of you have heard of Alexander Osterwalder. He has done so much fantastic work. And so, I used him as a source. And basically, it goes back to idea, and you want to take the idea to a marketplace. And folks, it's not that simple. Like I said before, you have an idea, but how are you going to implement that? What is the path for the idea to go to the marketplace? Okay? So essentially, the question that I'm asking is, if you have an idea in an organization, how do you make that idea come to fruition? How do you have innovation? How do you make innovation thrive in an organization? Okay? Now, one of the tools used for that is called design thinking. Now, because of the time limit in this conference, I'm not going to go into design thinking, but I have a slide in the appendix. But very briefly, if I were to make one statement, in design thinking that is conducted through workshops or hackathons, etc., you really have to see through the customer's eyes to understand what is needed to solve the customer problems. So design thinking is one tool. But the one that I'm going to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, is the lean startup methodology. Now, how many of you have heard of Steve Blank? He is I hope everyone gets a chance to meet Steve Blank and a few other people like Alexander Osterwalder. He's my guru when it comes to lean startup methodology. Just talking to him, just listening to him makes my day. So, you can define many things in a very difficult way or sometimes in a very simple way. So, at one time I remember asking Steve, tell me in very simple terms so I can explain to a little child. When I say little child, I mean not that small, but to someone who understands certain things. How do I explain lean startup? And he goes, Babu, these are 3 points. It favors experimentation over elaborate planning, small scale, customer feedback over intuition, listen to the customers, and the third one is iterations, iterative design. Okay, so that's a very simple way of explaining what lean startup is. But now if I were to dig deep into it, if I were to dive into the lean startup methodology, if you read the book by Eric Ries, he talks about 5 principles in lean startup methodology. 4 of them I'm not going to touch on. But the most important one from my perspective is validation learning. Validation learning. Now, what does it involve? One of the things it involves is the business model canvas, not a business plan, a business model canvas introduced by Alexander Osterwalder. And if you take a look at it, once you see the slide in front of you, you will notice that there are 9 blocks. Like value proposition is one of them, customer segment is another one, revenue streams, and so on and so forth. So it's 9 blocks. Think of using the business model canvas as a laboratory notebook or scorecard. Like in colleges or in schools, how you use the laboratory notebook to put down your initial data, and then the more experiments you do, the data might change. You don't necessarily go and remove the initial data, but you keep track of how the data is changing and what you're learning from that. So the business model canvas is to be used as a scorecard, as a laboratory notebook, to track your progress. But here's a key thing. The business model canvas is really used at any given time. At any given time, it really provides a coherent view of the drivers of your business. So any founder, anyone thinking of starting a business, a small business, needs to look at the business model canvas and use that. Okay? So all these building blocks are tremendous things for that particular founder. You start with your initial guesses or your initial hypothesis, and as you go through the process of establishing your company, you will notice that some of your initial hypotheses are changing, and you keep track of that. The other thing is the business model canvas also provides a rationale of how the company intends to make money. So the business model canvas is a very important tool in validation learning. The second one is my favorite, the customer discovery. if you consider a faculty member as the founder of a company, faculty members are very good at gallivanting around the world, giving presentations. They're not nervous. But if you talk to the faculty member and say, I want you to go to Lockheed, or I want you to go to Boeing, I want you to go here and talk to the customer to uncover the tormenting pain points of customers, they're very intimidated. Okay? So in the customer discovery process, you literally get out of the building, onto the streets, and talk to real human beings. Folks, and I'm not kidding you, you won't believe me if I say how many people think that customers are just buildings. Customers are not buildings. Customers are real human beings. So the thing that you have to do during the customer discovery process is get out of the building, try to uncover the pain points of customers. Then you sit back and ask the question, what did I learn? What are some of the key insights derived from these customer interviews? Oh, and by the way, what are the next steps that I'm going to take? And if you continue asking these questions for the rest of your life, you will have accomplished a lot, okay? And during the customer discovery process, as you're learning, talking, and finding out more and more, that's when you also start, finding out if some of your initial guesses are turning into facts. That's one of the key goals. Are my initial guesses turning into facts? The other one is the minimal viable product. The minimal viable product, by the way, it's not a product for sale. It's a product that you want to use to learn from. So if this is my minimal viable product, and if you're all my customers, and if I talk to each of you, you may have certain ideas, you may have certain things, okay? So I will build upon it. But it's never a product for sale, but it's a product that you use to learn from, okay? And finally, pivot. The term pivot applies to if there's a substantive change in one of the business model components. It's called a pivot. And pivot is not to be considered a failure. It's a good thing, okay? Your customer segment might change. Initially, you may have thought as a founder that my customer is going to be in the automotive arena. But guess what? During the customer discovery process, you may find out automotive is not the market, okay? So really, the whole purpose of this validation learning is to find out, is there a market for what I'm doing? Because, as a researcher, like faculty members and many students, they think that, oh, they love their technology. They sleep with their technologies. They don't even think about the market, right? But here, you're trying to address the market risk. And many a time when they find out that there's no market, oh, they hate that. They want to hang on to the Titanic. It's sinking, but they want to hang on to that. You can't do that. So this is why the lean startup methodology is so good. Okay? It helps you address the market risk. So the key takeaways are, use a business model canvas as a lab notebook, uncover the customer pain points during the customer discovery. Goal is to turn initial hypothesis into facts. And the other goal is the product market fit. The product market fit is the match, the fit between value proposition and customer segment. If the attractiveness of your prototype product that you're working on can be validated by your customer, you can claim that you have a product market fit, very simply, okay? Now, so why did I spend so much time on that? If you Google these companies, Solyndra, Pets.com, Webfan, they started out really well. But you know what? They thought they knew too much. And they prematurely scaled without talking to customers. I don't need to talk to the customer. They were dependent on their intuition. Faith-based entrepreneurship as opposed to evidence-based entrepreneurship. So they scaled prematurely, and guess what? This was the result. They're all gone. Okay? This is why lean startup methodology is so good. Address the market risk. Make darn sure that there is a customer or there are customers who really want your technology. Okay? And the other thing that you need to avoid during the customer discovery process, because we are so much in love with our technology when you are working on your own, that You're looking for that opportunity to dive deep into technology when you speak to a customer. Don't ever do that. Try to find out what their pain points are, build up a rapport, and then spend time. Now, this is very simple. Another one from Alexander Osterwalder. He's basically saying that, look, during the customer discovery process, lots of things happen. Okay? Don't get bogged down in all the details of what you are doing. Make sure that keep your eyes focused on the big picture. And the big picture is, do you have a viable customer or a viable business model? That's what this schematic illustrates. Now, the lean startup movement, is becoming so popular. In 2011, a couple of my colleagues and I were involved in starting a program at NSF called the Innovation Core Program, I-Core program. Okay, and it was introduced in 2011. The key things you have to remember, it is strictly an entrepreneurial curriculum. Doesn't involve research or anything. It's strictly an educational curriculum, an entrepreneurial curriculum. It's a 7-week program. And during this program, the sponsoring agency as well as the instructors are relentlessly direct with the teams that come in. It's a team effort, a team of 3. The faculty member who has been awarded by NSF, fundamental research, his or her student, typically a graduate student, master's or PhD or a postdoc, and a mentor with significant entrepreneurial experience. Now, here's the thing. The primary objective of the Innovation Core program, and keep in mind again, the guts, this is just a brand name. The guts of the program are the Lean Startup methodology, okay? The primary objective of this program is to help faculty members take their research from the academic lab to the marketplace. But there's a secondary objective. The faculty members don't want to be founders of their companies. At 90%, 99% of them, perhaps, don't want to start their companies. They want to go back to universities, be in that cozy position of doing research and publishing papers and gallivanting around the world. So the secondary objective, which is equally important, is empowering the students. And folks, students are not afraid to take risk. And that's why I love students. Anytime I get an opportunity to meet students, I like to ask them a lot of questions. So that's the secondary objective of the program. Once this program was introduced, lots of other agencies found a tremendous amount of value in the program, and they started implementing that program, the same model in their agencies like DOE, NIH, USDA, and others. Hacking for Defense is it's a Lean Startup methodology course for the intelligence community, the Department of Defense, to come up with solutions to technical problems that they have. And Steve Blank is the one who created the program. I-Core at Ohio, it's, instead of NSF funding, it's a state that's funding and requires the faculty members from the various universities to go through the program. Large corporations like General Electric, made use of the Lean Startup methodology, internally to act like a startup, to be more efficient in making products, not just products, good products, and get them out faster, to customers. And foreign countries. Next week I'm working with a team. We're going to finish up a program in Egypt called Innovate Egypt. It's all about teaching Lean Startup methodology to the faculty members from the various universities there, and the students, etc. And I just sent an email this morning to Anne. I don't remember, last night or sometime when I woke up, saying that I would love to see a program called Innovate Estonia. Where teams go through like the Lean Startup methodology. Now, the impact of entrepreneurship training, I'm going to leave this slide on for a few seconds. I'm not going to go through every bullet point. They're very self-explanatory. Now, one thing you will notice that many of these items are measurable. You can really come up with a number. How many companies have you created? How much funding have you received? You can come up with numbers. But you know what? The one that strikes me the most, the one that fascinates me, because it's so hard to get data, is the change in culture. Think about it. Faculty members who are used to doing basic research, all these years they've been used to getting money, they hide in a cubicle, they get their students, they're used to seeing their own shoes, they think that those are the only shoes that exist, they think that's the only color that exists. But now, all of a sudden, they go through this lean startup methodology where they have to get out of the building, talk to customers, and now they say, oh my gosh, they're different color shoes. They're steel-toed shoes, no steel-toe. You know, their whole culture changes. So the change in culture is significant. How many faculty members, it doesn't matter whether you're in Estonia or the United States, when they get funding, they don't go out and talk to anyone before they do research. They get the money. Oh, I'm so proud of myself. I got money. Now I'm going to do research. But you know what? When I talk to the faculty members, they said, Babu, this is so great. I said, why do you say that? Tell me more. Now I look at research in a totally different way. Tell me more. Well, before I embark on the research, I now literally go out and talk to perhaps not 100 people, but at least a few to see, do they really care about this? Is there a need for this kind of technology? So that's the change in culture. And you know, it's so hard to measure that. So again, most of them are measurable, but otherwise the change in culture to me is striking. Success factors for academic spin-offs. You know, again, I'm not going to dwell on every point, but I just want to highlight certain words. You know, you can give them millions and millions of bucks and expect them to start a company, but it's not going to happen. Certain things need to be present in their system, in their body. One of them, and this is not in any particular order, one of them is passion. They have to be passionate. They have to have the right mindset. They have to have, you know, the right attitude, rather than saying, oh, I know it all. No, 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 I want to do it correctly. So passion, mindset, et cetera, those are some of the key things that make successful founders, okay? So, you know, oops, what happened? So those are some of the things that are really important for academic spin-offs. Okay, and of course, you know, the help from incubators, accelerators, and I put some more slides in the appendix. Okay, speaking of innovation programs, just very quickly some of the examples of innovation programs. And again, I'm not going to discuss any particular one in detail. So what I've done is I've given you, you know, mentioned the innovation programs on the website in the appendix section. But all these innovation programs that you will see in the appendix, they have something in common. They all have industry-academia collaboration. Every one of them that you will see in the appendix involves industry-university collaboration. Every one of them receives seed funding from the federal agency. And the third one is every one of them involves early-stage technology development. Now, the question oftentimes is to be asked, but Babu, how do these programs compare on the innovation spectrum chart? So I'm sure you're familiar with this innovation spectrum from Angus King. So you have the resources and discovery to commercialization. Now, remember, you know, if you look at NSF, the center of gravity of the National Science Foundation is to do discovery. So if you use NSF, it's just, oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm okay. I knew I would fall at some point. So, you know, you have the resources, and it goes from discovery to commercialization, and then you have the value of death, right? So NSF is way on the left-hand side. This is all about discovery. But these innovation programs that you're going to find in the appendix, they're more to the right. They're more over here, okay? So it's beyond discovery. When you get a chance, I sincerely urge you, if you're interested, to look at every one of those programs. and really focus on them and see what they're all about. And it's very, very interesting. The most notable ones, I talked about the Innovation Core program. I will talk about the SBI program shortly. But very briefly, a very notable one is the Industry University Cooperative Research Center. In short, is an IUCRC. This program has been around for over 40 years. Now, at GE, when Jack Welch was the CEO, he used to say, do more with less. I worked for a company where one of his proteges was the CEO, and we had the same thing, do more with less. And this is a program that truly does a lot with less money from NSF. NSF provides a seed investment. So it's all about creating a consortium, universities and industry members. It's all about doing pre-competitive research that is mutually beneficial to both faculty and universities. You know that faculty members have pride, right? They want to do what they think is the best. When NSF is giving the money, NSF is basically saying, you are going to recruit large corporations, small businesses, and you are going to listen to them. Because the research, sure, it has to be mutually beneficial, because eventually for the consortium to exist, these corporations have to pay a certain membership fee. Okay, so it's their money, because the seed investment is tiny, tiny. So it's their money that's going to make things happen. So the members are the ones then who are really vocal about what research needs to be done. They talk about their pain points, and based on that, they come up with the research topics. The other thing is, this particular program gives you royalty-free, non-exclusive rights to intellectual property. Okay? All members agree. And because of the antitrust law, if you're a company from America and a company from China wants to come and join, you can't say, no, I can't allow this company to join this center. Absolutely not. Any company, as long as the company pays a membership fee and signs the membership agreement, has the right to join that consortium based on the antitrust law, okay? And finally, the last statement I want to make about the IUCRC program is it also allows for international collaboration. So, if there's anyone here from, universities in Estonia who want to be part of this, you can talk to me, you can communicate with me later on through email, and I'll be able to tell you how you can collaborate internationally. The only thing is, NSF is not going to pay you, so you have to have a source of funding from Estonia. But it's a tremendous, tremendous program. Like I said, it has been around for a long time. Again, these are very, very self-explanatory, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but this simply shows the impact at the institutional level. But what I really want to talk a little bit about is, what does it take? Because when I was in industry, I worked with universities. When I came to NSF, I gave out money. So I learned a lot. And so, the points that I came up with, and this is not prioritized by any means. First one is like anything in life. There has to be a happy marriage, okay? Everyone needs to trust one another, all the stakeholders. The second one, don't be obsessed with IP. When I worked for a large corporation, we gave money to the university, and the university would say, oh, no, the IP belongs to us. Okay, you can have it. We'll take the findings, the results from your experiments, and we're going to generate our own IP. So I always tell people, don't let IP destroy the relationship. Don't be too obsessed with that. The third one is identifying the right partners. For something to be successful, you need to make sure that the industry have sending the right people, or you have the right faculty members working on that project. Be aware of differences in culture, academic time versus whatever. And, with all due respect to the faculty members, if you're here, at least in the US, I used to give a hard time to the academic people. If I would say, okay, Professor so-and-so, I'm going to come and meet you at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock goes by, 9:10, 9:15, the faculty member is not there. You can't run an organization like that. So when we say 9 o'clock in the real world, it means 9 o'clock. So the difference in culture still exists. The other thing is, when a company is working with you, with this contractual research or through a consortium, understand that there has to be some return on investment. It's not about just publications. We get so hung up on publications, invention disclosure. Honestly, if you ask my opinion right now, Babu, do you care? I don't give a damn. Publications are very good, builds up your resume. Invention disclosures are good, but I would rather have patents in use rather than just invention disclosures. What good does it do to tell people that I have 350 invention disclosures, but none of them is in use? Now, that's from my personal perspective. Don't take it in any bad way, but that's me talking, okay? So if I were a member and I want to work with you, I want to see some real benefits for my company. Not for me, but for my company. And that is, how can I use that research that you're doing? How will that benefit my company? And focus on short term. Don't make it a 5-year project because, a member, the company might, money-wise, they might start doing poorly. So focus on short term with clear deliverables. Manage accountability. In other words, come up with metrics to measure, progress. And the other one is be aware of the conflict between use-inspired research versus fundamental research. What do I mean by that? How many of you have seen this? No? On the y-axis, you have search for fundamental understanding. On the x-axis, you have consideration for use. And if you look at high understanding, you heard of Bohr, right? Bohr atom. These are his words. Everything we call real is made up of things that cannot be regarded as real. Great. You heard of Amazon, right? In the United States, Amazon, the company. In Amazon, people are always packing things and shipping them. So can you imagine telling this guy, that's not really real? He or she's going to start throwing shoes at you. Get away from here. Now, but still, he's okay. I respect him. Edison, on the other hand, said, anything that won't sell, I don't want to invent. Its sale is proof of utility, and utility is success. And he didn't care about fundamental understanding. He just cared about use. So, many a time at the National Science Foundation, a reviewer would say to someone, I might say to Anne, oh, Anne, stop being so Edisonian. That is an insult. It's not a compliment to Anne. Basically, I'm saying, Anne, think about some understanding, some fundamental understanding. Don't focus on just the use, okay? But where you really want to be is the posthumous quadrant. Both understanding and use. So a lot of these faculty members now, as they go through the Innovation Core program, or with the help of some of these innovation programs, they're heading in that direction. That's the use-inspired research, okay? I'm not going to go through them. You can read them on your own, some success stories. Small Business Innovation Research Program. Any small business, as you know, has a risk profile, right? And what are the risks? Human, financial, technology, and market. 4, right? You can draw them. Now, if you consider the sources of funding, angels, VCs, they all take certain amounts of risk, Someone might take a bigger risk with a human, someone might take whatever. But the one that takes a huge risk, and it's uniform in all directions, is the federal government. Okay? You'll have a perfect square. Everything is equal on all the 4 axes. All right? So, in the SBIR, there's certain phases. And by the way, there are 11 agencies or so that distribute money. And please don't ask me about the funding level, because the funding level changes. But they all share something in common. One is, it starts with the phase 1, which is about feasibility. Then the phase 2 is the prototype stage. And beyond that, there's no federal money for small businesses, okay? But one of the good things that have started to happen is a lot of small businesses, once they get to phase 2, they can then seek money from third-party investors to eventually be able to cross the valley of death. It's a tremendous program, and people love it. And just recently, the level of funding went up. And this particular plot shows the success rate. Typically in phase 1, the success rate is about 18%, and in phase 2, it's about 35 to 40%. And how many of you have heard of Qualcomm or Symantec? They all started out as SBI companies, and now look, they're filthy, filthy rich, or the founders are filthy rich. And of course, when you are filthy rich, you pay more taxes, and the taxes are used again to help the grantees. Okay, I'm coming to an end now. What did I learn from accelerating innovation lessons learned? So one of the things is focus on use-inspired research. And again, from my perspective, this is one of the lessons I learned. Systems thinking is important to innovation. Educate to innovate. This entrepreneurship education, I memean, honestly, I wish I had that many years ago when I was young. It is vital. Every university, in the United States, I work with a lot of universities, and I always try to tell them, you have to instill this entrepreneurial mindset in these students, especially when they're young, because as youngsters, they're not afraid to take risk. Focus on evidence-based innovation, not your intuition, okay? The partnerships matter. You cannot do innovation in vacuum. Partnerships matter. And finally, innovation contains the unknown. What does it mean? I showed you this before, right? Where the curve, I'll make sure I don't walk off the stage. It went up like this. But that's just a theoretical curve. We don't know what the right side looks like, and that's why we have the question mark, okay? So what could the right-hand side of the innovation spectrum look like? This is what I showed you earlier. You could have the curve like this. You could have the curve like this. You could have a curve like that. And when this happens, we call it the unbridgeable gulf of death. Not the valley of death anymore. You are dead now. Okay? So innovation contains the unknown, and we need everyone to be aware of that. With that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll entertain any question.
Hello, thank you so much, Babu, for your presentation. Let's take a few questions again. I'll start with one since I have the microphone in my hand. You were talking about the importance of industry-academia cooperation. That's something that we always complain in Estonia about, that we are not good at. Tell me, what's the role for facilitators in that cooperation? Do the universities find the industry partners on their own through their tech transfer offices, or is there a role for state agencies like the NSF?
Okay, typically, so the answer is kind of, it varies. Many a time, the industry contact will come through a professor. Okay, so if you're a faculty member, you might know someone, and that's how the relationship starts. But the problem with that kind of a relationship is, then you start looking at that person as a friend of yours, right? So when you have to really sit down and honestly discuss certain things, you might be intimidated. So it's always good to work through someone else and reach up higher up in the organization. In many cases, the tech transfer office will get involved. The tech transfer office is kind of changing. Many years ago, it used to be all the legal minds, lawyers. But now, things are changing rapidly, so the tech transfer has all kinds of people who are helping establish industry-university partnerships. So to answer your question, the facilitator, the role could change.
All right, anyone from the audience?
Thank you for your presentation. You told us about success stories, but what about failures? We have many politicians and governmental officers here.
Thank you very much for bringing this up. And let's take like the startup, the lean startup methodology. That's a very good question because we always want to share the success stories. Failures in the lean startup program, when the teams complete the program, at the end of the program, at the end of 7 weeks, they have to say go or a no-go. Go means, I have the metrics that matter, and I'm ready to start a company, and these are my next steps. A no-go could be that because of a pivot, I have to restart my customer discovery process, or guess what? Everyone I talked to, nobody gave a damn. Now, please understand, this is where especially faculty members, since they're part of teams, they don't like that. They immediately come to the conclusion, oh my gosh, I'm so well known, the whole damn world knows me, and I've totally failed. No, because we want you to fail and fail fast. So failures, we celebrate failures. Think about it this way. Do you know, think about the companies I showed you about the no validation process. Companies that prematurely scale without doing any validation learning. You have no idea how many people write SBIR proposals to get money, and those proposals, they're terrible. They're terrible because they come up with, they dream, they have a glass of wine and they start pulling numbers out of the blue sky. They say, well, this is the kind of revenue we're going to make. Okay, so by going through a program, when they realize that nobody cares, we are saving them time and energy from writing a proposal. So we celebrate failures. And we also talk about them in the right places.
We have one more. All right, go ahead.
You finance the project, but still you find out that it's failure after many millions of dollars. But then, how you, as a governmental officer, manage this situation?
We like it. We like it. Look, absolutely, I would be very happy if every story turned out to be a successful story, right? But we also realize it's not going to happen. And I said, this is where, and I'm not bragging here, but this is where people with our kind of experience, we know what to expect. So a lot of the people who run the innovation programs, they come with background like mine, where they know things don't work out always the way we expect them. Okay?
All right, one back there.
Thank you for your speech. I was just thinking, coming from academia, there is a contra-reaction among academicians to all this project-based and commercialization of science attitude, which is called slow science. How do you react on that? Can you elaborate on that? That academia is actually, in big part, very much against those initiatives, what you're elaborating on.
We need the academicians for a variety of reasons. Academicians are good at doing research, whether it's basic or applied research. And again, please understand, it's from my perspective. The only issue I have with most academicians is, not all, but most, is because they would like to go through certain programs, but they don't want to take the next step. It's okay with that. But having said that, I think as an academician, as a professor, your role, and when I say you're, not just you in particular, but in general, your role is to empower the students. Just because you don't want to do it, don't prohibit the student or the students from pursuing, commercialization. And this is why, in this Innovation Core program that NSF set up in 2011, like I said before, the secondary objective is to empower the students. Because the students in this generation, they're totally different. They're willing to take the risk. But we also need the academicians to continue doing research and continue providing students who can take the risk.
Any more questions?
Question from there. luckily it wasn't that bad. Yeah, I didn't see it. It was good.
I have a question about design thinking. As I have tried 6 years to change the culture towards more human-centered design thinking, and probably not succeeded yet. So if you have any suggestions, what the government can do in order to bring this design thinking culture into our organizations and companies as well?
You know, as you know, I no longer work for the federal government, but I think the federal government is not going to tell you how to do design thinking. Okay? In other words, if you're asking the question, will the federal government support me? You might try, but I would say you're not likely to succeed in getting funding from the federal government. And I'm, again, talking about the United States. Because design thinking is an approach, right? The difference between design thinking and the lean startup methodology, the reason for an agency like NSF and others to pick up on that and support it is because the difference between the two is the sense of urgency. In the lean startup methodology, there's a tremendous sense of urgency. Boom, boom, things need to happen now, we can't wait. But in design thinking, it's a rather laid-back approach. You know, perhaps not the right expression. So I would be very alarmed if someone would give you money in that. But it's an equally good tool for making innovation blossom. You know, they have ideation, hackathons, workshops, good, but you know, you can try, but I don't know.
Anyone else? All right, thank you so much, Pavel.
Yep, thank you very much.
We have presents for our first half-day speakers here.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So we'll now go on a coffee break, and we'll be back at 11:10. Yeah. Oh, sorry. One more moment. We have an announcement to make. Raul, please.
Thank you. I start with a story. 20 years ago, we played a game in Estonian television and tried to find how to figure out the program with a negative rating that nobody really want to see. And we put 3 boring words in a row and got a program called Educational Innovative Program about the European Union. So it seems really boring. Things have changed. Today is a great day. Anne's seminar on here, and at the very moment in Finland is going on the presentation of a very special book which called 100 Social Innovation from Finland by Ilkka Taipale. I am the warm-up team in Estonia. This book has very special destiny. It's 33 languages already translated and more to come, which means that here must be something. It's actually 100 stories about economy, social life, everyday life, the different stories, what Finns have done differently than others. Very short stories. And the Estonian edition is very special. It's not translated by one person. It's 100 Estonian people from culture, from politics, from journalism, from every field. They made their story here. They translated it. It's actually in Finnish is talkut, eesti keeles talku work. So its book is now here. I heard that the limited edition of this book is sold here. Yes, it's there. Yes, thank you. And I have one concern only. You don't have enough copies, but so be fast. It's now in Estonian language. Thank you.